shelter, it's unlikely he survived.
If the child would be able to access some sort of moisture or dew or moist leaves, then that could increase it somewhat beyond the 3 days.
It's hoped the hat or the Minions shirt Gus was wearing may have been discarded if he was lost, confused and possibly dehydrated.
Police are in the final stages of assessing hours worth of drone footage taken at the property using infrared technology to pick up any clues. At this stage, there are no further searches planned, but detectives haven't ruled out returning.
I know that there is still work that is ongoing within South Australian Police. They continue to make inquiries into a few different sources of thinking, but I'm not in a position to comment on it beyond that.
But he may have not gone far at all if he was too scared to move.
I think that fear would be an absolute factor, and that would impact on the ability to move and mobility, but also around finding shelter.
It has now been 1 month since 4-year-old Gus Lamont vanished from his family's remote property near Wooltana in South Australia's Outback. 30 long days, and still not a single trace. The land where he disappeared is vast, open, and unforgiving, a sea of red earth and silence that stretches endlessly toward the horizon. The kind of place where sound dies quickly, and footsteps vanish within minutes beneath shifting dust and wind. At first, it seemed like a case of a young boy wandering off, the kind of tragic accident that the wilderness too often claims. But as the days turned to weeks, that explanation began to crumble. No footprints, no clothing, no scent trail, not even a sign of struggle, just a silence that felt. And now, as new theories emerge, some suggesting Gus could have traveled further than anyone first believed, others are asking a harder question. What if the answer isn't out there in the open desert, but closer to home? If you stand for truth and justice, like, share, and subscribe to Shadow Detective. Comment where you're watching from, and what you believe really happened to Gus Lamont. Because somewhere in the South Australian Outback, a mystery still waits for the light. The story of Gus Lamont begins far from the cities, deep within the heart of South Australia's Outback, near a place called Wooltana, a settlement surrounded by red sand, saltbush, and silence. It's the kind of landscape that humbles you, where the air tastes of dust, the wind moves like a whisper, and the horizon feels endless. Life out here is both beautiful and brutal. Days can reach blistering heat, while nights fall to biting cold. Locals know that survival depends on preparation, and that nature, though majestic, shows little mercy to those who underestimate it. It was here, on a quiet property more than 200 kilometers from Adelaide, that the Lamont family lived and worked, a tight-knit household, familiar with the rhythms of isolation, and among them, a bright, curious boy named Gus, just 4 years old, small for his age, but adventurous in the way only children can be, unafraid of the open land that stretched beyond the homestead fence. That familiarity is what makes this story so haunting. Because for the Lamont family, the Outback wasn't supposed to be dangerous. It was home, a place of laughter, chores, and wide skies. And yet, beneath that vast beauty, something else lingered. A quiet reminder that in the Outback, even the safest places have shadows. It was August 24th, 2025, an ordinary Saturday on the Lamont family's property near Wooltana. The late winter air was cool, dry, and still. At around midday, 4-year-old Gus Lamont was last seen playing near the homestead, and the family had been going about their day, tending to routine tasks, the kind that fill long hours in the bush. But sometime that afternoon, Gus vanished. At first, it was subtle, a few moments of quiet that didn't feel unusual. Then, minutes turned to alarm. His name was called into the open air. No reply, just the rustle of dry wind against the gum trees. When it became clear he wasn't within sight, the search began immediately. Family and neighbors combed the property, calling out for the small boy in his blue clothing. Within hours, police, emergency services, and volunteers arrived. By nightfall, search teams were operating under floodlights and drones. Thermal imaging aircraft scanned the desert floor. Mounted officers, trackers, and even aerial spotters joined the effort. The search grid extended outward, 6 kilometers in every direction from the Lamont homestead. But despite every resource, every hope, and every prayer, there was nothing. No footprints in the dust, no discarded clothing, no sign that a child had ever moved through that landscape. For comparison, authorities looked to other recent disappearances, cases where children who had wandered off were found within hours, sometimes even less. In one instance in the United States, a 3-year-old boy lost in a dense cornfield was found in under an hour using a thermal drone. But for Gus, in terrain far clearer, far flatter, far more visible, there was no trace. The desert had given no answer. And with each passing day, one question grew louder. If he truly wandered off, why did the land remain silent? In the days following Gus Lamont's disappearance, the tone of the search began to shift. What started as a desperate rescue effort soon became a methodical investigation, one layered with uncertainty, frustration, and quiet disbelief. Police confirmed that over 120 personnel, including local volunteers, emergency responders, and air support, had scoured the area surrounding the Lamont homestead. Drones flew daily grid patterns. Helicopters traced the dry creek beds. Ground searchers followed every visible trail leading away from the property. But after 6 full days, not a single item of Gus's, no shoe, no shirt, no trace, had been recovered. As hope began to fade, experts started questioning the core theory. Was it really possible that a 4-year-old could vanish so completely from open country? Some suggested he might have traveled farther than initially believed, up to 10 or even 12 kilometers, carried by instinct or confusion. A Finnish wilderness expert went as far as proposing that a child could cross remarkable distances when frightened or disoriented, far beyond typical expectations. But local trackers and Australian bush search specialists strongly disagreed. If Gus had moved that far, they said, there would be something. A footprint in the soft dust, a thread of clothing caught on a branch, or at least a scent for the search dogs to follow. Instead, there was nothing. Attention slowly began to turn inward, back toward the homestead itself. Some investigators, as well as members of the public, questioned whether the area closest to the property had been searched thoroughly enough. Reports circulated, suggesting that beneath the Outback soil, near sheds, tanks, and even under structures, areas may have gone unchecked in the rush to expand the search outward. It was a theory quietly echoed by some forensic specialists. In other cases, like the disappearance of university student Kristen Smart, ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs had eventually uncovered evidence directly beneath a family property, decades later. Could something similar have been missed here? Still, police have not indicated any suspicion of wrongdoing. The official position remains that Gus most likely wandered from the property and succumbed to the elements. But with no proof, no evidence of life or death, that conclusion feels incomplete. And as whispers of internal tension between family members surfaced in local reports, particularly between Gus's father and grandmother, the search for truth began to feel even more complex, because the land wasn't the only thing hiding something. As the search for Gus Lamont entered its second week, a quiet but persistent unease began to settle in. How could a 4-year-old simply vanish, without a sound, without a trace, from a property surrounded by open scrubland? At first, the explanation seemed simple enough. He wandered off. It's a tragic but not uncommon story in Australia's rural heartlands. Children get curious, follow a path, chase an animal, or wander after a noise. But in those cases, they're usually found, sometimes hours later, tired, dehydrated, scared, but alive. Gus's case, though, didn't fit that pattern. No tracks, no scent, no item of clothing, and most tellingly, no point of direction. For experienced trackers, this absence of indicators was almost impossible to reconcile with a wandering off scenario. So, if not that, what else could explain this? One theory gaining traction online suggested an accidental concealment, that Gus may have fallen into an underground cavity, an unused borehole, or even beneath the homestead itself. Properties in remote areas often have hidden hazards, old tanks, disused pits, drainage tunnels, and if a child were to fall into one, it could easily go unnoticed in early searches. Another theory, more chilling, proposed an abduction, though police have publicly dismissed this, citing the property's isolation and lack of evidence. Skeptics argue that the sheer absence of clues fits that narrative all too well. If someone had taken him, someone who knew the terrain, or the family, it might explain why the search dogs never found a trail. And then there's the wildlife theory, that perhaps Gus encountered a predatory animal. But this too seems improbable. There are no reports of significant blood traces, drag marks, or evidence of animal activity near the property. Even if such an encounter had occurred, something, even a scrap of fabric, would remain. So we're left circling back to one uncomfortable possibility, that Gus never left the immediate area at all. That's why many observers, including independent search specialists, have suggested revisiting the property itself, not just around it, but underneath it. Ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and subsurface imaging have solved similar cases years later, exposing remains hidden just meters from where searches began. And yet, in all public footage, there's no clear indication that such technology has been widely deployed at the Lamont property. That omission, whether by oversight or by strategic choice, continues to fuel speculation. Because if Gus didn't wander off, and he wasn't taken, then we're forced to ask a question few want to face. What if the answer has been beneath us the entire time? As days turned to weeks, a troubling pattern emerged, not in what was found, but in what wasn't. No physical trace of Gus, no scent picked up by search dogs, no sign of clothing caught on a fence, or small footprints in the sand. It was as if the land had swallowed him whole. But experts began to question whether the methods used in the early days might have unintentionally limited the search. Some observers pointed out that while police confirmed the use of thermal drones, they were most likely flown during daylight hours, a critical oversight in Australia's harsh, sun-baked outback. Thermal imaging works best at night, when the ground cools and a human heat signature stands out against the cooler landscape. By day, the sand radiates heat, making it nearly impossible to detect a body or movement through thermal contrast. Others questioned the lack of cadaver dog involvement. Across countless international cases, from Kristen Smart in California to buried victims uncovered in New York, cadaver dogs have proven indispensable. Their training allows them to detect even trace amounts of human scent long after decomposition begins, often in areas humans would never think to search. Yet in the Lamont search, there's been no public record or media mention of their use. Not once. Then there's ground-penetrating radar, a tool capable of revealing soil disturbances, hidden cavities, and buried remains without excavation. Investigators in similar cases have used it beneath homes, driveways, and surrounding terrain, sometimes years after a disappearance. In the Gus Lamont case, experts online have urged that same approach: return to the homestead, scan beneath it and around it. Because searching the surface may not be enough when the truth lies below. What's particularly haunting is how history echoes itself. In the Kristen Smart case, investigators searched the suspect's property multiple times before finally discovering traces of her body beneath a deck, 25 years later. It wasn't new information that cracked the case. It was new technology applied to old ground. The lesson here is simple, but painful. Sometimes we stop searching too soon. And in the case of Gus Lamont, that possibility hangs heavy. Because every missed tool, every untested method, every unexplored cavity could mean the difference between closure and endless speculation. We've seen before how answers can lie just meters away, undetected, unnoticed, unimaginable. So, what exactly did investigators overlook? And how might revisiting those early assumptions finally expose the truth hidden beneath the red Australian soil? Exactly 1 month on, the Outback still holds its silence. The wind that once carried the voices of searchers now carries only questions. Questions that echo louder each day. Gus Lamont remains missing. The official line remains unchanged, that a 4-year-old wandered off and never returned. But to many, that explanation no longer fits the shape of the evidence, or the lack of it. Because if Gus had truly wandered, there should have been something. A footprint, a scrap of fabric, a trace of scent on the dry wind. But there was nothing, and in true crime, nothing often means we're looking in the wrong direction. Investigators, volunteers, and the public alike continue to hope that somewhere, somehow, an overlooked clue will emerge. But as history shows, in cases from Australia to the US, hope isn't enough. It takes persistence, technology, a willingness to question the first story we were told. Experts now suggest the search must evolve, not expand outward, but inward, back toward the homestead, beneath the floors, into the spaces no one wants to consider. Because sometimes the truth isn't far away, it's buried under the weight of assumption. For the Lamont family, every sunrise is a reminder of absence. For investigators, every unanswered question is a call to look again. And for the rest of us, this case stands as a haunting reminder that the line between a mystery and a tragedy is often drawn by how far we're willing to dig. If you have any information that could assist in the disappearance of Gus Lamont, please contact South Australia Police or Crime Stoppers immediately. And if you believe every missing child deserves to be found, share this story, keep asking questions, and help keep Gus's name alive. Because sometimes, the smallest voices need the loudest echo.